Good afternoon. It's great to see everyone in this audience. It's so important for me to be here because I started my career in entertainment 25 plus years ago, and groups like this did not exist. CAPE, which was a small organization then, has really grown, but it just shows the importance of TAAF, to have panels like this, to have mentorship. And so I really hope you guys appreciate what the board and the members of TAAF have put together. To see so many people in one room is really incredible. So people ask me, what does Rideback Rise mean? It's the name It's the name of our nonprofit. And it starts with our for-profit company, which is called Rideback, and that is a film and television production company. And Rideback is a cowboy western term. I spend a lot of time in Montana, and cowboys have a code in life. You have a Rideback gang. And the code is, when you're a cowboy, there are times when you ride and you fall off your horse. And the code is if someone falls off their horse, you ride back, you get them back on the saddle, and you keep riding. So in the creative business, as you guys know, there is so much failure. When you're trying to do something bold and different, you are going to fall off your horse. So it's really important for us to have that community where when you fall, there's someone to pick you up. Then 2 years ago, when COVID hit, 2 years ago, we decided to start a nonprofit and take the Rideback concept a step further. We formed Rideback Rise. And we did that because we realized that there was so much anti-Asian hate, and frankly, just a lot of hate against people of color. So we took the principles of Rideback and we expanded into the nonprofit, and we'll talk about that today, but we formed Rideback Rise. And the idea of Rideback Rise is that when you're successful, you ride back and you bring the next generation along. So I'm excited to talk about Rideback Rise and talk about P&G's involvement with TAAF today.
Rideback Rise has 216 in our amazing cohort for this year, 16 fellows and residents, and we have 200 as part of our circle.
A lot of us don't come from these spaces where there's access and privilege or entry points into the business.
Rideback Rise's goal is quite ambitious. It's to help propel narrative change and to advance racial equity.
So for me, what I want to see is more talent, making content, commercial content, because that's how we really create change, is make things that people actually see so it really impacts the culture.
We've had folks like Robert Rodriguez and Dan Lin lend their names to be mentors, Jessica Gao, Ken Powers, Phil Lord. Having those industry icons come and be a part of the program, that's what we pride ourselves on at Rideback Rise.
It's amazing not only because of the financial support, which as filmmakers we all need, but also your peers.
I love this spirit of collaboration, and I think this is a rare occurrence.
People move through this industry and up the industry in community.
Rideback Rise has been life-saving and life-giving.
My life is actualized through this program with these people at this time, and I want more of it.
Things are always going to be up and down and crazy in this business, but when you have heart and you have soul and you got a backbone like Rideback, you feel unstoppable.
So please welcome my esteemed industry peers and panelists today. First is Lela Coffey. She is the Vice President of Multicultural Business Acceleration at P&G, Procter & Gamble. And we have Eric Liu. He's a writer, producer, and Rideback Rise resident. And then we have Diana Mogollon, who is the CEO of Rideback Rise. And then Julia Prescott, writer, comedian, and Rideback Rise fellow. So I just want to start by taking this all in. 600 people here. As you guys may know, we came from far away. I so appreciate, Lela, you came from Cincinnati.
I did, yes. Glad to be here.
And the rest of you came from LA. So.
LA. Yeah. In the house.
So we've made progress as an AAPI community through movies like Past Lives, shows like
Beef.
Beef. But according to the 2024 Status Index, most people couldn't even think of or didn't know a famous Asian American. When people provide a name, they say Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, and Kamala Harris, and Jackie Chan is not even American. So Diana, can you talk about the state of diversity and racial equity in mainstream entertainment right now?
I can, and it's the system is broken. How about that? Let's start there.
It is a broken system, and that's why Rise exists, because let's be clear, there's no shortage of amazing BIPOC and AANPI talent. What there is a shortage of opportunity, risk-taking, and funding. And that's why we're here today, to build Rise and bring in and activate more creators of color into the system, and to train them and to do it in a very deep and broad way to make sure that we are creating that change that we so need in the business. As they're contracting, we need to double down, and we need to make sure that we're doing all the work so that we can really see the result of that work as soon as possible.
So I'm going to go off book a little bit, Diana. So clearly, not everyone on this panel is AAPI. You have Lela and Julia who aren't. What's the idea behind what you do, and frankly, even yourself? How do people of different backgrounds work together? Is this an AAPI issue? Is it a person of color issue? Talk about kind of what you're thinking is behind the issues of diversity.
Absolutely. Well, and I have to give credit to the summit and to Masoom and to the convening. We had a convening yesterday with the narrative change folks, and I have to say yesterday was a pretty inspiring day on many levels. But what I have taken away is that the power, which we know, the multiracial power that we have in this room and beyond with our consumers, but when we talk about multiracial unity, and that's something that was brought up yesterday, and that's exactly what Rideback Rise represents and what we do, which is about really collectively bringing all of us together, creators of color, and using our power, using our creative power, and using our influence in the industry to create change. So it isn't an AANPI issue. It is all of us together helping solve these big problems.
Yeah. Can I just jump in and add to that really quickly? I'm a fellow in the cohort, and I've always believed that specificity, of course, is the soul of narrative, but I have found that the more specific the fellow cohort goes into their own personal histories with their stories, their own personal experiences, the more universal it becomes. I am not a black man, I am not an Asian woman, I am not, the many different great people that are in that cohort, but I relate so deeply to their stories, and I think that speaks on what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So Julia, I'm going to build off that. You were talking about relating to people's stories, but I'm talking about a TAAF study with CAPE about AAPI representation in the entertainment industry. And that study showed that 95% of AAPIs working in the entertainment industry surveyed said that AAPI representation behind the scenes is inadequate, so 95%. And moreover, 93% agree that representation on screen is similarly lacking. So Lela, I'm going to throw the next question to you. P&G has been a really important partner to TAAF in investing in powerful short films that raise awareness of the AAPI experience, inspiring conversation, and understanding. You guys also helped to introduce Ji Young, the first ever Asian American character Muppet on Sesame Street. So from a corporate perspective, why is it important to invest in diverse narratives? What impact can it make?
Yeah, it can have huge impact. And I mean, Sesame Street, there should never be a child who sees content that they're viewing and doesn't see themselves represented. So there's just some of those things that we need to fix. To your point, it's everybody's issue, but where there's things that we can do like that, amazing. And then the name is part of a broader project we have at Procter & Gamble called Widen the Screen. The content that we all make, the name, the purpose of that is what we call widen the screen, to widen your view. We have got to get to accurate lived experience of people with content made by those people so that we can have broader understanding. That is the sole reason why we do that work, because we want to make sure that we are offering up different perspectives, because what we found, and especially with the name, the talk, the look, those pieces of work create awareness and create conversation. And we believe that if we can start a conversation, we can drive change. So we are very committed to do that in the space. And then the other reason why it has such impact is that there is not enough content for all of us as BIPOC, AAPI, that represent relevant and resonant points of view. So we try to put as much as we can of that content into the ecosystem, because our brands want to advertise around it so that they are in relevant spaces with consumers that say, hey, you care about me, you care about the community. So it has a really big impact if you look at it from a consumer lens.
So I'm going to go off book again, Lela. And this may be a little controversial, but as you may know, I don't want to get too political here, but there's a movement that people say these API or people of color programs are illegal. Some have gone even as extreme as they're racist, and there is a movement to try to eliminate these kinds of programs in companies. How do you guys deal with that? Do you guys talk about that at P&G, and how do you deal with that?
We talk about it all the time at P&G, and the reason why we are and will stay and always will be committed to this work is it is better for business. So we have data that shows that relevant, resonant content that's put in relevant places, so owned and operated media, whether that's Black, AAPI, USH, performs better. It drives more consumer trust, and it's like, I think it's like almost 40% increase in purchase intent. So we have data that proves that. So we keep it very tied to what it does for the business, because no one can argue with, hey, if that's growing the business, that's good. So you will always see us talk about it in, this is right for the consumer and it's right for the business. That can't have holes poked in it. So we do a lot of talking and training of others to say, if we want to continue to do this work, we've got to find a business reason for it to exist, because they can't poke holes in that. P&G's stock is like a 163, 164 right now. Tell me what we're doing isn't working, right?
I love that.
Well, speaking to the business for a second, I think that we see these reports come out, and I know recently McKinsey has put out a lot of reports, but I think that somehow the folks who are in the Hollywood ecosystem at the top have missed the memo, because when you're leaving $25 to $30 billion of opportunity and economic opportunity on the table, something is wrong. You're not hearing the business piece of it, and that's the opportunity, again, to connect the business piece, to your point, to the creative component, and put it all together cohesively to say, look, this is not only good for business, this is going to drive your stock price up. This is going to super serve consumers that you want. This is going to reduce churn on your streaming platform, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, representation is not just a polite thing or an altruistic thing. I mean, we have so many diverse stories that we want to tell, and they're so wonderful, but shout out to Jackie and his team for that McKinsey report. But specifically, it was talking about how, as Asian Americans, we have great earning power. We are one of the communities that earn the most, but we spend the least on media, and that we would spend more if it authentically represented our stories. So yeah, we're leaving.
There's a cause and effect there.
There's a cause and effect there. Absolutely. We're leaving billions of dollars on the table. So it makes a lot of business sense.
Yeah, it does. And we are very committed to spending in the space, but we can't put all of the media dollars we want into the market right now with some of the, with minority consumers, because it's not there. The content's not there, the media's not there. And so a lot of our work is focused on also, as well as content, finding the media partners that we can work with as well.
Great.
Makes sense. Except put all the dots together.
So we're talking about content. Let's talk about movies and TV shows. What movies or TV shows have you guys watched that made you feel seen?
I'll jump in. For me, so I'm white Hispanic, and when I tune into a show that features a lot of Hispanics, for me, and I think we've seen this all out there with, like, it's either one of two things. It's either this, like, very white pleasing portrayal of that demographic, or it's a very overly traumatic view into basically an immigration story. And for me as a creator, I love to find content that has every other shade of the rainbow that actually is more realistic to what I actually want to write and what I actually live. For me, it's not just seeing myself and my culture on the screen. It's seeing a smattering. I have really enjoyed the show This Fool on Hulu, if you've caught it. It features Chris Estrada, Frankie Quinones. It's an amazing show. But I also have really loved shows like Pen 15, Julio Torres' recent movie Problemista. All of these different shows and movies that undoubtedly portray a person of color dealing with their own issues, but it's not like through this very strict lens of it having to be this textbook definition of I'm a person of color in the world. It's like, no, we are all just living our lives. And I don't know about you, I'm not waking up in the morning every day going, oh, here I am, another person of color, like going about the world. So I like to see more shows that show those different hues, and those are the things I want to make and things that I feel like I can make through Rideback Rise.
For me, it was Better Luck Tomorrow. I think that defined an entire generation. It really shattered, the stories what's possible for Asian Americans. I love the story coming out of when it first premiered at Sundance. There was someone there who stood up and was like, how can you represent Asian Americans in such a negative portrayal? And then Roger Ebert stood up, the movie critic, and he was like, Asians have the right to be whoever the hell they want to be. And I feel like Justin Lin, I mean, obviously Fast and Furious, Warrior, it's been so defining for me personally, but it was actually his work on YouTube that was the most impactful for me personally. Yam Yam F, You Offend Me, You Offend My Family. That was the YouTube channel that featured a lot of Asian American creatives. This was over 10 years ago, and it was at a time when YouTube was really where I feel like our community turned to be able to tell our stories. And that, for me, influenced and was inspiring me to go into YouTube personally, to start making more and telling the stories that I want to tell. So yeah, it actually, you mentioned shows or films, it was actually probably YouTube at the very beginning for me.
And for me, it was a movie that came out in 2018 called Nappily Ever After. I don't know if anybody ever saw it, with Sanaa Lathan. And I will say that it made me feel seen and a bit exposed, I think. And it was all about the journey kind of that black women in their hair, which is a huge topic for us that's not well understood by a lot of people. So I thought that movie did a great job of showing us at our best and our worst, I will say.
For me, it was a couple. Ugly Betty, because I grew up on telenovelas. I grew up in Latin America. And when I saw Ugly Betty, I'm like, oh my God, that was based on La Betty la Fea, which was a huge telenovela in Colombia. To see it come and transform into the U.S. as an amazing show, and America doing such an amazing job. And more recently, Farewell. I mean, a movie that, for me, transcends, but from a generational standpoint, I totally related to it from my own family. So the power of video and film and TV generationally and from a cultural impact, I mean, just hearing all of you guys think about it or talk about it is just amazing.
I just want to add one more, too. I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once was incredible. I think we can all agree. What an amazing Oscars year when that won. But specifically, I remember watching that movie and seeing the mother-daughter relationship and being like, oh no, I need to call my mom.
Or your therapist.
Or my both of them were getting a call that week. But it hit so deeply into something that felt really vulnerable, but in a really great way.
Totally.
So I'd love to talk a little bit more about Rideback Rise. We mentioned it earlier. Eric, why don't we start with you? Want to know, will you explain, not everyone here is a creator. What exactly do you do, and why did you sign up for Rideback Rise as a resident there?
I mean, my parents ask me that all the time. What do you do? What does it mean? What is,
YouTube?
What is going on with you? That's me. I was on this show called The Resident, 5 seasons, over 100 episodes. It was on Fox, now it's on Netflix. It's the #2 kind of most viewed show on Nielsen currently, right now. So I was a writer-producer, and what do you do? I mean, I was asking myself that same question when I first started on the show. I had no idea. This was my first TV show. I had no background in film, no connections in the industry. I grew up in Texas. You don't grow up, with people around you saying, hey, Eric, one day you can write for television. And one day you can be in Hollywood. No, that was not a thing. So I went to medical school.
Every parent's dream.
Until I started doing YouTube. And so I left, medicine to start a YouTube channel with 2 of my friends. And I fell in love with telling stories. And one thing led to another. I started writing for television. I never actually went to do residency or practice medicine, but Rideback Rise, in a lot of ways, feels like residency. In medicine, the apprenticeship model is so vital for you to become a successful doctor. It's the same for writers, for creatives. We need that kind of support, that mentorship, and most importantly, the community. I think that's what it comes down to, is this is a community with Julia, Dinah, like all of us, to be able to support each other. Julia's a lot funnier than I am. And so I would go, I would write something and I could go, hey, Julia, how do you make this funnier? Yeah. I could go to, we have such a diverse set of experiences in the cohort, and there's nothing like that out west. That sounds so weird to say, but out in Hollywood, we have nothing like that to be able to really support us. We're mid-level career. We have a lot of programs that get our foot in the door, but then what happens? A lot of people are kind of left, hanging. And so this is a way for us to level up, to create the projects and tell the stories that we want to be able to see.
So Eric, I want to push a little further because we look at that photo and you're the success story. You went to medical school, you're on a hit TV show, you're producing episodes, running episodes. Why do you need any help? Because people on the outside go, okay, Eric, you've got it all made. You
need so much help, Dan.
Why do you need a program like Rideback Rise to help?
I mean, well, so much of what I've learned by failing. A lot of the YouTube stuff, a lot of even being on the show, you kind of learn just by doing it. But there was never a point where someone sat me down and was like, hey, this is what it's like to act. This is how you actually write an episode of television. This is how you actually write a movie. And I had no access to mentors, other creatives in the industry. And just 6 months into the program, every single week we have different executives, different other screenwriters, creatives coming to talk to us, donating their time and their energy to be able to support us. And for me, that is that is kind of it's like it's called an accelerator, but it's so much more in my mind because it allows us to be able to sharpen and train our skills, not just creatively, but also on the business side of things, to learn what it takes to get something made. Because that's the real problem. It takes a long time to get anything made in Hollywood. Helen Zia is in this room. She's an author. She wrote a book called Last Boat Out of Shanghai. I optioned that book 5 years ago, and we're still working on it. It takes that kind of support, this community, to be able to come together and say, hey, let's do something here. There's a cohort of us, and there's a lot of you guys. So, let's make something happen.
Eric's always like, we should make a TV show about the cohort. And I was like, one thing at a time. Got to get my projects out first.
So Gio, throw it to you. You're a comedian writer.
Yeah.
Why did you join? We talk about, okay, what do you do? And why did you join Rideback Rise?
Yeah, so I started my career, I got very, very lucky where I got a writing job. Yeah, there's me. I got a writing job right out of school. I was 22 years old when I stepped into my first writer's room as a staff writer. And that's not to say that from that point forward, it was smooth sailing. There were a lot of gaps in there, stretches of like a year and a half where I had absolutely nothing. Very briefly, I worked for the Ellen DeGeneres show. We can talk about it separately. And I just was so hungry, and so I knew I wanted to be a writer from birth. My mom loves to tell a story where at age 5 she asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I said I want to be a boss. And so I knew that this was the only thing that I could do. So in that spirit, it's really hard to get a job, and I knew that even from that first one. So you just say yes to everything, and you go yes, 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 yes. And what ended up happening, my very first job was in kids animation. And you get typecast very quickly. And I didn't realize that I thought that I was entering new doorways that led to new corridors, when really I was just truly going in a circle. And I'm really grateful for all of the experiences that I've had in my career, and all the people that I've met within animation especially are lovely. But right before Rideback, I remember getting an email for an OWA open writing assignment, and it was for what is essentially, it was for a toy company, and essentially they wanted me to write a movie about a necklace. And I burst into tears. I just thought, I don't know as a creative if I can go down that road anymore. And I had already worked on so many shows that, I was basically writing song lyrics for a talking flip-flop, and just things that happen in Hollywood. And all the while I had these ideas that were so counter to what my professional life was. I would go to my reps and I'd say, I have this idea for a movie. What do you think about this? And they'd go, yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know if we can get you that meeting, because they're just not looking for people basically like you. And that was really, really disheartening. And it's difficult because, like Eric was saying, it's a very isolating, road to go down, and it's so easy, especially at mid-career. This is the put up or shut up stage, right? You could either cash in your chips, move back home, but I'm from LA, so I could just move back to my mom's house, change careers, or double down. And for me, Rideback came at the exact right time. And what I love about it, too, is that, you know, in entertainment, especially if you're trying to pitch a movie or pitch a TV show, you're just constantly walking into rooms. Writers are a dime a dozen, and you're trying to sell yourself as much as your idea. And what I love about Rideback is that I don't have to convince anybody. People believe me when I say I have an idea for something. They don't scrutinize me. They don't look at my resume. They go, this is a creative person in front of me, and I'm buying into Julia versus buying into the specific projects. I just feel like I'm not having to dance as much. And also, right after the writer's strike, this happened not a minute too soon. I'm so happy.
Well, it's a proof point. I think Rise is a proof point that you need critical interventions at many different stages. So we have a lot of interventions at the beginning. This is an intervention in the mid-stage of their career in a very accelerated, assertive way. Thank you, Dan, for paving the road and the blueprint for it. And even now being in it, I've only been here a few short months, but it's amazing to work with the cohort, to work with the industry, and work it from many different angles. So we're working with the stakeholders, we're working with the studios and networks, we're going to see them on a weekly basis, we're talking to them. How can we help solve these big problems that require big solutions to create big impact? So we all have to put our heads together to do that, and it's a sort of full 360, impact.
Diane, I want to build off that because a lot of people in the room here are in the for-profit space. Lela's in the for-profit space. Rise is a nonprofit. Why is Rise a nonprofit versus being a for-profit?
Absolutely. So having been in the for-profit space for many years, at many different studios and networks, so sort of an insider, or infiltrator I used to call myself, because I was inside always like, we had mission aligned and create change. Now that I'm on the nonprofit space, well, the reason why it is because you need a longer runway. It's about patient philanthropy. It's about saying, you know what, these big problems that we need to solve, it's not going to happen overnight. We are having conversations that the industry's been having for 40 plus years. The industry itself is 100 years old. So we have to come up with innovative solutions, and we got to do it in many different ways with many different partners. That's my point about a multiracial unity, doing it all together. So there is a longer runway. On the for-profit side, as you know, we see it in the news all the time, they're looking at the stock price, they're looking at what's next, what's tomorrow, what's the profit, what's our bonus. And so here you need a slightly different runway to be able to do the things that you got to do. Some things are hidden, some things take longer, creative, you have to incubate and develop over time. So it's just a matter of a little bit of a longer runway, the right folks at the table, and the right team, and thanks to TAAF, who has been there since the beginning for us, to help us figure this out together.
I mean, it's having that vision, right? Because you mentioned that the industry is going through a contraction.
Oh, horrible.
That's kind of the word that we're hearing all the time. If you're not in the industry, you're like, what is this contraction? Well, people are losing jobs. Shows are getting canceled. Just recently, Quantum Leap, NCIS Hawaii, both featuring AAPI leads, got canceled. Fewer shows are getting made, but actually created. Contraction, what does that hurt? Who does that impact? People of color, disproportionately. Yeah. And we're already underrepresented in the industry, so there's not a greater time. There's a greater sense of urgency these days to be able to do something like this, to have that vision, to be able to say, hey, we can't go backwards. We can't afford to do that. Mm-hmm. We got to keep pushing. We got to keep moving forward to tell the stories we want to tell.
Yeah. Earlier today, we heard about idealism. We're idealists. We see the glass half full, but we need to be pragmatists. So Rise is sort of the pragmatic way of attacking the problem and doing it all together, including allies in the advertising space and the for-profit space to help us and help create that narrative and that change that we all need together.
Yeah, because it's all risk-taking, right? And this contraction, the phrase that keeps bouncing around is alive till 25. All of the companies are just trying to stay alive till 25. But then what's to happen to us at the bottom of the totem pole? I mentioned the writing strike earlier. You guys probably saw that was a very difficult time, existentially difficult for all of us. And I still am feeling personally the consequences of that, and I certainly see it in my peers. So how do you keep that glass half full with that, knowing that the first thing that's going to be on the chopping block is we're not going to take a risk on stories featuring people of color because it's untested. Well, why is it untested? And then you go all the way up, the thing. And the thing I also wanted to add to this, every time I describe Rideback to a family member, a friend, they all look at me and they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're just like, this seems too good to be true. How are they taking advantage of you? And Dan, how are they taking advantage of? No, I'm just kidding. It's great. And I also wanted to add that I almost didn't apply to it because of all of the reasons, because of my own career experience, because it's so easy to let that imposter in you kind of talk you out of it. I seriously was not going to apply, and it's changed my life. Now it's encouraged me to just go for it in all arenas.
There you go.
Diana, I just want to touch on this for a second. How much of a demand is there? Like, how many people applied? How many people did you have room for?
Absolutely. Well, endless. We have, I have big growth plans, Dan. I want to grow this baby. I mean, we're already talking about, tripling the number of fellows and growing even further. We have a 5-year plan I'm getting started on. I'm going to present it to the board in the next board meeting. But last year, in our first inaugural year, we had almost 500 folks apply. We're hoping a lot more will apply this year. I'll use this as a platform to promote right away that this summer, coming in June, we'll be opening up the application process for the new cohort. As you heard me on the video, currently we have 200 folks in our broader circle, and we have 16 fellows and residents. So our goal is to grow, to help as many folks as we can, and to help solve some of these narrative change issues in the business. And now that, Dan, you're at Netflix, we're going to come over to the folks at Netflix and say, come on, folks, help us out here.
For sure.
Yeah.
So Lela, I want to throw it back to the for-profit side. What advice do you have? You're vice president of P&G, largest advertiser in the world, and you know a lot about the consumer and the multicultural consumer. What advice do you have for Eric, Julia, other creators in the audience about what kind of content they should be making?
Keep doing what you're doing. Your stories of perseverance are amazing to hear. We have to have this content. Like, everybody sees the demographic numbers. The numbers are not going back. So I love the perseverance. Everybody in the room, keep at it. There is a place, there is space, there is room, there is a need for the content that you're making. Come to us. We are always in business and looking for it. So keep it up. Very inspiring, and I probably could not do what you guys are doing, but I just encourage you to keep doing it. Like, keep knocking on the doors. They will open. The numbers prove out that it's going to be needed, and we have to have it.
Can I jump in one more thing as Leah's talking to the audience? Remember that you guys are the power consumer. I just want to make sure. You guys open movies at the box office. This is where we have the vote. We're the swing voter here in terms of multicultural consumers. So that power shouldn't be lost on you, and you guys have a lot of power. You, your network, your family, your friends, in terms of making and creating the change that we all need as well.
So I want to talk about numbers for a second. And TAAF and CAPE had a study that reported that more than half of those surveyed said they lacked mentorship, and nearly 1 in 5 were considering leaving their jobs, which is really sad. But that's really why Rise, TAAF, and others in this space are investing in facilitating mentorship. I want to talk, Lela and Diana, will you talk about what you're doing to build opportunities for mentorship and community for creators of color?
Sure. I'll jump in. So P&G actually has a pretty similar program that I guess it is for profit, but it's called the Queen Collective, and it was born out of a collaboration between Mark Pritchard, who is our chief brand officer, and Queen Latifah. So we were after the same thing, trying to figure out how to increase the diversity in the advertising industry, and there needed to be a place to start. So that program does mentorship as well, nowhere near, I think, the numbers that you guys are, but Queen mentors the filmmakers. Brands might write a brief to a filmmaker to say, hey, we would love to advertise around a piece of content that does this, or sometimes they come with content that they already are planning to shoot, and we help in that process. And then they go to film festivals, and what we're starting to see is we're on season 5 right now, I think, and some of the early creators are now on the rosters of our big advertising agencies to shoot commercials, which is exactly what we're after. We are trying to economically empower women, people of color, non-binary, and at the same time, again, it's the content that they're creating that that is so beneficial to us. So we found a way to kind of do that in a very similar way. I think we might need to partner and figure out what we can do. But that's what we see, because the numbers are deplorable in the industry, and everybody has to take action. And as the largest advertiser, it's kind of our responsibility to use that platform to create some of these programs for good.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Well, we do similarly. There's 2 parts to the mentorship sort of coin. One is on the executive level, and being an executive of color in the entertainment industry, Absolutely. You feel, again, the imposter syndrome. You don't have many folks to turn to. So there's a lack of mentorship and availability of that on the executive level. On the creator level, that's why it's built into Rideback Rise, where we make sure that each of the fellows and residents are matched with a specific mentor. We take great care to make sure they align. And we have amazing folks, as you heard, Robert Rodriguez, Dan Lin, Chris White is your mentor. And they meet on a monthly basis. Some of the meetings, I mean, they can meet more or less. They share projects, contacts. But I mean, you guys can speak to it more in terms of your mentors, how that's impacted you and how you are taking advantage of that relationship to help you in your careers.
Yeah, Chris White's nicest guy. For those who don't know him, he's had a fascinating career. He started off with his brother directing American Pie. And then he went on to write Golden Compass, one of the Twilight movies, most recently Rogue One, The Creator, last year. And without like a program like this, there would have been no way to be able to get in touch with someone at that caliber who is creating some of the best shows and movies out there. And to be able to have that support, to be able to have him offer to read and give notes and feedback and thoughts on what I'm doing in my project through Rise as well. That kind of stuff, I mean, that's priceless.
Mm-hmm. And needed.
And needed.
Yeah, and my mentor is Daniel Chun, who comes from the half-hour TV world. He's written on The Simpsons, The Office. He's had multiple shows go to series. And yeah, I'm so appreciative of just how generous he is with his time. Maybe it's him stalling on a rewrite. we all do those things, but he's been so amazing, just sort of sitting with me and talking to me not only about like how to navigate this business from a creator standpoint, but just giving me feedback on like not only my Rideback projects, but perhaps illegally some other things that I'm sort of thinking about. He's been tremendous.
Well, that's a good point I want to make, because I don't think we had time to put it in the video, but each of the fellows and residents and the folks in the circle, they come in with projects. So the idea is that we actually incubate and develop in a whole year's time, their projects all the way to fruition, meaning pitch decks, finished products, package it, and hopefully get it out the door and match them with the right producers and financiers. So that's the sort of accelerator part of it. So they're not only there learning and growing, but they're actually working on specific projects and multiple ones at that. So just want to make sure I make that note.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about mentorship a little bit for this room, because I think the theme for me is generosity and mentorship, which is all these mentors do this pro bono, number one. Number two, their mentors do not look like their mentees. And I want to push that in the room here. Before I came here today, I went to see my mentor, and his name is Strauss Zelnick. He's the chairman of Take-Two Interactive, but he's been my mentor for 15 plus years before I was anybody in the business. When I started Rideback Rise, he raised his hand. He said he wanted to be on the board of directors. He wanted to be one of the first donors. So I want to push you guys in the room. Don't expect that your mentor necessarily will look like you. Your mentor may not look AAPI, and that's okay. Chris White is a white guy helping Eric. Daniel Chun is a Korean helping Julia. You have to kind of expand your mind, because a lot of times what we're trying to do, there may not be an AAPI in front of you who's done it before. And don't be closed-minded. Look for people people want to help. People want to be generous and help. But I can't tell you how many times that someone who doesn't look like me, most times a white male has helped me, but it's also up to us now to help the next generation. So just encourage people in the room, through tonight, through the next couple of days, there may be people that you can mentor or people that can mentor you. The tricky part, and it's a proper balance, is that you can't be creepy. A lot of times, you don't, like with my mentors, I didn't stalk him. I didn't ask him, will you be my mentor? It's not like that. There are programs like this that take the creepiness out of it, but also part of it is you just have to build a relationship. It has to be natural and organic. But I cannot tell you the importance of mentorship in my career, and I certainly will see it in each of your careers. I'm sure, Lela, you've had mentors in your career as well. So. Absolutely. Diana, we'll circle back to Rideback Rise. What's in the future of Rideback Rise? What are you doing? How do we work together to overcome some of these obstacles that we're talking about in Hollywood?
Oh my goodness, there's so much that we're doing. I think that having just sort of landed at Rideback Rise and sort of taking the baton from you, Dan, in terms of like what you've created, the blueprint with this amazing board that we have, this cohort, it's just making sure that it's thriving, sort of healthy, living and making sure that everything is going well. We are a tiny little team, so we are growing in that respect. But we are seeing that at this moment in time, more than ever, who would have predicted that the industry was going to be at this really unfortunate moment in time? We're seeing the challenges, but we're also taking that opportunity and seizing that and saying, how are we going to double down? How are we going to further create and grow Rise to heights that we haven't imagined? Because we know the work that's happening is the right work to happen at the right time, and then making sure that we have the right resources in place, and obviously thanks to our funders and donors and partners being able to do that work in the community. So for us, it's about the year right now ahead of us and thinking of the 3-5-year plan. How do we keep growing? How do we make sure that we solve these big problems? These are existential problems that we need to make sure we have the brightest minds around and the right partners so we can really help come up with solutions in the short term and in the long term. In the short run, these folks with their cohort are graduating December, which I can't even believe that that's happening. And then we're about to open up for our new cohort, another hopefully 200 plus folks coming in at the end of the year for 2025. So we're keeping pretty busy, Dan.
So I want to remind you, Diana, as Strauss, our board member, says, you are building the Harvard of content incubators. So
yes,
keep that. It's got to be a high bar.
Tiffany, Harvard, I know, believe me, I know. When I saw Strauss recently, he's like, it's the Harvard. Yes, it's the Harvard, yes.
Yeah,
we have to.
I turned to Eric backstage, it occurred to me that in the future, when you're, bringing in new cohorts, you may play trailers for some of the movies that we generated in this cohort.
Absolutely. And you will be it's insane. Respected alumni. You will come back. That's the virtuous cycle, right?
Yeah.
You will be mentors as well. See, this is like the virtuous cycle of it all happening, yes. And we will definitely be there. We want to make sure that your projects get made, get produced, get financed, hopefully with many of the support in this room to make sure they actually come to life when we see them at festivals and on Netflix and on different places, hopefully.
I mean, it's a movement. And I think so much of what happens in our community come out of the grassroots. TAAF is a perfect example of that. Rise as well. We're the first class. There will be many more classes. It's a movement that's going to change the industry. I really do believe that. And if you make your way out to LA, come to Rideback Ranch. There's a boba guys there. Shout out to Andrew. I will treat you to boba. Let's chat. There's a whole bunch of us. Yeah.
Yes. No, we do. I mean, an incredible campus and location. Thank you, Dan and Sophia, for envisioning that. It is really, you feel the creativity sort of oozing from the walls, and the way that we build community, everybody loves being there and creating there, which is really one of the hallmarks of Rise. So if you are in LA, please let me know, and please make a pit stop so you can have a boba with Eric.
Yeah. One more thing to what you said, Diana, of when you give people that initial spark and to be the change in that way. I feel that not only within the intimacy of our cohort and just seeing how everybody's radiating with creativity, but I see it within myself too. And I think that just goes to show that when you give somebody an opportunity, and it's not just a hollow opportunity, you go, I'm taking a bet on you, I'm taking a risk on you, and it may not make company sense if we're going up the flagpole for that, but I'm going to see what this happens. It could unravel unlimited possibilities. You strong-armed me into directing a short film during this, and at the beginning of the fellowship, I said, I think I'm allergic to directing, and you convinced me otherwise, because you're a bully. And
I'm a bully. I'm a bit of a bully, yes.
Immediately, but I think that those kind of changes are what we talk about, and they're very small on the level, but then they just permeate out.
Absolutely, you got to build those muscles.
Mm-hmm.
So last question, obviously a lot of people in this room, what can people in the room do to help this cause? Oftentimes when I'm sitting in the audience, I don't want to just listen to a panel. I want to hear kind of what's the action step? What can the people in the audience do to help drive narrative change?
Yeah, I'll start. I think this work is not done by being quiet or being polite, right? We have to make demands. We have to make asks. If you have a voice in the room or a seat at the table, you should be asking, why are we not using an AAPI director? Why is the talent not reflecting what the diversity of the world is? Somebody has to be asking those questions. So my advice to each of you is you can contribute in some way, but be the voice, ask the question, and don't stay silent about it. Because if we stay silent, the road is going to take much longer. Be the voice of change.
Excellent.
Eric?
Yes?
So Dave Liu, who's in this room, wrote an article about Jeremy Lin and his wave off. Maybe some of you remember that moment against Toronto, but that has stuck with me ever since. And it goes along with what you're saying, is that, for us, so much of our story, so much of our existence needs to be visible. We need to have a voice. We need to stand up, and we need to say, hey, we're not a monolith here. We talk about AAPI, we talk about BIPOC, but we're not a monolith. And so there are so many stories, so many creatives, so many writers, directors, executives out there, and programs like RISE, programs like TAAF are extremely integral to be able to support, but not only just support, but it's through this power together that we can really be able to make some noise, that we can get our stories out there, and that we can really start changing the narrative. Stories have this incredible power to shape how we feel, how we think, to shape the world, really. And so we have that, ability, even though we might think we're just one person or a group of people, but we have that collectively. So let's use our voice, let's use our stories.
Julie?
Yeah. I think you vote with your dollars, right, when it comes to seeing content out, and it's important when certain movies come into the box office to go and see it, not just out of like a cultural duty, but to see different kind of voices. I mentioned Julio Torres earlier. Problemista is a movie that was produced by A24, and I think it's frankly a miracle that it was made, and a miracle that it had such a great theatrical run. And it's a very unconventional story from a person of color. So I think encouraging those kind of stories is always going to have a trickle-down effect to be very positive. And I think also just familiarizing yourself with programs like this and sharing it to the people in your life or whoever, I think is really important too, because we come from, in Hollywood, we have these studio fellowships that do a certain thing for a certain group of people to help break them in, but we don't have nearly enough of these kind of fellowships, these kinds of programs. So I think just encouraging the name recognition of that can be really important, just to, you never know who's going to have their mind changed by even knowing that it existed. When I was on the picket line for the WGA strike, I felt a deep purpose not only to fight for my own career, but to fight for the career of the future generations. And as I mentioned, I started my career in kids animation. I didn't want a whole generation of kids to be inspired by TV and film and want to write and want to create, but then realize that that industry is unavailable to them. And so that's, I think, the spirit of what we're doing here and how we can encourage that going forward.
Well, thank you.
Donate.
Go ahead.
Mine is donate. Donate.
Oh, yeah. Money, please.
Well, thank you to each of my fellow panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Moderator.